Okay, our next interview is with what I laughingly call an old-time bookseller, because he's been around a long time, but he's not an old bookseller. He's just an old-time bookseller, Irving Zucker Art Books. And Irving, could you just tell us a little bit about your background, where you were born, schools you went to, what got you interested in being a bookseller?
Very simple. To begin with, I graduated high school when I was 18, or they kept me over half a year because they discovered that I had cut hygiene. So because of that, they didn't permit me to have my parents go to graduation. Well, so be it. Anyway, after I graduated, I had a few different jobs. I never liked any of them. Then one of my friends, who had been working with a bookshop on 6th Avenue between 48th and 49th. The name of the bookshop was Marmor, M-E-R-M-O-R, Marmor Bookshop. He decided to go to college, so he recommended me for this job. Well, I took the job, $10 a week, that was more than I was making anyway. And I liked, first of all, I was a delivery boy, and he had me collate some books. He also told me whenever I had idle time, he would say, look at the books. Look at the books. I kept looking and looking. So it got to the point where I knew what a Van Gogh was, and a Gauguin, and a Picasso, and a Baroque, etc., etc. Well, this went on for about a year, and then he sent me out selling books. He sold to the advertising art field, primarily. He also sold to some textile designers, but I never went to them. I went mainly to people, lettering men and designers and typographic people, that sort of stuff. And after a year, I wasn't making much money. So he wanted me to work a half a day, a week, half a day, and half the salary, $5 a week. I said, I'm sorry, Mr. Momo, I can't do that. So I left, and I went into business for myself.
The year. You remember the year?
Oh, yeah, this was, let me think a moment now. 1939 to 40. I was in business for myself at 40. I rented space, desk space on 42nd Street, 55 West 42nd, $2 a month. They accepted my mail and my messages, etc. Well, it wasn't bad. And what I did at that time was buy new books and go around with the samples of the new books to the people in the advertising field I knew, and I took orders, and then I bought the books, and I delivered them, and I built them. I did this for quite a while. As a matter of fact, I was in Philadelphia one day, walking along Art Street, and there was a shop there. I don't know what kind of shop it was, but there was a book in the window, Becker's Ornamental Penmanship. And it was also one engraved plate. So I walked in, and I asked the man what it was. He says, well, I have all the plates from this book. It was published originally, printed originally in 1854. And I have the plates, and I have a copy of the book. I said, well, how much do you want for the plates? He said, $30. I says, well, I accept. I'll buy it. And I bought it. I took it back to New York with me, and I went to, I investigated first about who was going to print it. Well, I looked in the classified, and I found a printer in Brooklyn. Anderson Lamb was their name, and they were on Lower Fulton Street in Brooklyn. I went to them, and I got an estimate of how much it would cost to print 1,000 copies of the 33 engraved plates. Well, I didn't have any money at that time, and so I went to a man who I knew because I had worked for him when I was in high school, I went to school from 9 to 1. Then I shot uptown and I worked for him 25 cents an hour. He was a very nice man. And I told him what my situation was. He said, I'll give you the money, you print it. You'll get the books bound, you'll let me have the books, and you'll pay me as you take them, which was very fair.
Yeah.
So I did that. Then when the book was printed, and it was printed in 1941, I went to Philadelphia because I had customers there. I sold it there. I sold it in New York. I then took the train to Cleveland, Detroit, and Chicago. I stayed up. I got the classified directory, and I made a big map, north, south, east, west. And I put names down as I went through the book. And I went around selling the book, and I must have sold at least 100 copies in Chicago.
Wow.
$6 a book. Well, this was really something. So, after that, this was 41. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was at a football game on December 7th. I had bought I made a lot of money. I bought a portable radio from RCA, $20, which at that time was like
That's a lot of money.
And I was listening to the game and watching the game. And then an announcement came over the radio, Pearl Harbor was attacked. So the next day I finished whatever business I had, and I went home. Now, of course, I didn't get into the Army until I think it was 1942 or something like that. So I went around in New York buying and selling books the way I had been. Now, we have to fast forward, I think, because I was in the Army, but after the Army I got out, and I didn't know what I was going to do, and I was married while I was in the Army. So I had different jobs, but I didn't like any of them. So I told my wife, I said, honey, I am going to try to make a living just selling books. And I did. I sold books, and this was already 1946 or 7. And then I got some breaks, like in I'm skipping around years. Okay. I'm trying to bring out some highlights in my career. Harvey Brewer, who worked for Wire on Lexington Avenue, he had had a heart attack, and I went to visit him in the hospital. And he said to me, Irving, did you go to the Mercantile Library? And I says, no. He says, well, they're selling their books. They're deaccessioning. So I went there, knocked on the door of the librarian's office, and walked in, and he pointed his finger at me, and he said, I know you. I was delighted. I remembered him. When I had worked in this letter shop, when I was a kid, he was working in the mailroom. Well, he had gone to library school, and he became a librarian. Well, to make a long, I'll try to shorten it as I go. I wound up buying 15,000 books from the Mercantile Library. I bought them. Now, Seymour Hacker had a guy working for him. Bill Long was his name. He was a book scout.
I know who it is.
Well, I asked Bill whether he would catalog the books. There were 15,000 books. I would go up there, select the books. He would select. I would pile them up, put them in cartons, and my children, my son, my daughter and son. My daughter must have been 8 years old now, and my son is 4 years younger. So they would pack the books, and I would then get the books into the elevator, put them in my car, bring them out to Brooklyn. And I had shelves. I had board shelves, and we started shelving them. But then Bill got sick, and he couldn't work for me anymore. So I asked Halmeyer, who worked for Swan, whether he could do the job. And he says, oh, yeah, sure. Every Friday night, I would pick him up. We would go to Brooklyn. We'd go out to eat, and then we went to work, and he'd work until 12, 1 in the morning. That night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. And what he did was he cataloged, these were not elaborate listings, but, author, title, place, date, etc. And we had 3 copies we had sheets of paper that were rectangular, cut in half, and there were 3 copies of everything: blue, yellow, and pink. So one set of the list was numerical. Another set we categorized and alphabetized, and that was another set. And then I don't know what the third set was. Well, anyway, after this was all said and done, it took about a year and a half. I had the slips, and someone gave me a hint, the lead. They said, there's a university in Chicago, University of Illinois, rather, at Carbondale is buying books. Why don't you give them a call? I gave him a call. Well, the librarian paid me a visit, and the first collection he bought was about 2,000 books on economics. Now, I didn't know anything, but Bill, he knows. Yeah. They bought that collection for $10,000. 2 or 3 months later, they bought the Americana collection for $25,000. Then they bought then they bought other collections from me. Then the librarian told me, why don't you try the University of Illinois at another place in Illinois? And I did. The librarian came down, and they must have sold at least $100,000 books to both.
Wow.
$100,000 worth of books.
In those days.
In those days. So with that money, I started dealing in modern illustrated books. Chagall, Picasso, so on. Vincent Price was doing work for Sears Roebuck. He was like the expert. And there was a young guy who he had working for him. His name is Jeffrey Laurier. And Jeffrey Laurier knew me. And he asked Vincent Price whether he would come to my house. I had a couple of things. I had, for instance, Redoute, Lilies, half of the set. And I had Chagall Bible. Well, he bought a few things from me, and over a period of years, he must have spent, and at that time, it's a joke, I paid $8,800 for the Chagall colored Bible, which today sells for 200 and some odd thousand.
Wow. And
I was selling him to make $1,500 or $2,000. And I sold him 2 Bibles like that. Now, these sales gave me impetus to buy other modern French illustrated books. Not for him particularly, but I got into that field. And naturally, I've done rather well in it through the years. Now, I'm giving now highlights of my experience and dealings in the book trade. That was one of them, the Mercantile Library. Another one was, you ever hear of John Lindmark, the bookseller at Poughkeepsie? Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I have a little package of what I call Lindmarkiani, the correspondence between he and I. And he wrote to me one day, and he said, Irving, the reason he did was, one time when I was there, I had my catalog, which was 1958, and I gave him a copy. He looked through, and he says, I don't believe you have these books. I says, really? Why don't you come with me? I'll show you. Well, anyway. So, when I'm trying to collect my thoughts as I talk, just give me a minute. I have to.
A senior moment.
Yeah, you're right. Anyway, the books I bought, this is the way I bought the books from Lindmark. He said, Irving, these are all the books I have in the basement, on this floor, and the attic. And I want $1 a book. I don't care if it's worth 100, 1,000, or 50 cents, or worthless. Pamphlets count. Every pamphlet is one, etc. Well, I hired guys from Manpower, and those days they had Manpower. I hired one kid, and the kid and I and Lindmark went through this, and we counted book by book. They were in shopping bags, lined up on the floor, and then in bookshelves, etc. And it took, 2 or 3 days to count all the books. 27,334. That was the total amount. Wow. I know it because that's what I wound up paying him. But before I got the books, I went through hell. He told me that he wanted the money, and I'll take it. He says, Irving, he pays the money and takes the books. Well, this guy was 78 or 80 years old. So I got a lawyer, and the lawyer says, don't give him money. Anyway, this went up and back. I used to go up there 3-4 times a week. I'd come to the door, and he would do this to me. Go away. Go away. He was a cantankerous old son of a bitch. But I liked him. I felt he was 100% honest. The wind-up was, I didn't get I forgot about the lawyers, and I told John, look, John, I will give you the money, but I want you to rent me the house so I can get the book. Fine. That's what happened. And then the day of reckoning came where I hired a trailer. I bought cartons, 600, 1,000, I don't know how many cartons there were. And I hired people from Manpower. Going from the top floor down to the next floor, I had bought lumber, and you fill the cartons, you slide them down from one floor to the next, and people loading the trailer. Well, after all, now, I didn't tell you how I sold it already. I called the university in New York, the University of Stony Brook, the librarian, and he sent his guy, Welch, Dr. Welch, he was his assistant. He sent him with me. I took him up to Lindmark. He looked at the books, etc., and they bought the books. The deal was they had to buy a minimum of 10,000 books. Or no, 13,000. That was the deal. $3 a book. Who cares? Whatever they buy, I have it. Well, it came to the point where I hired someone, and the books were all packed and delivered to them. They paid me, and in my checkbook, what a day this has been, etc. And I did the same thing with the first big deal I made with the Mercantile Library. Who had ever seen a check for 10 or 25,000?
Not in those days.
No one in those days. That's number 2. See, all I'm telling you about now are these financial deals and collections that I had bought. Then there was another collection I bought in Philadelphia. I was in Philadelphia one time. I don't know why, what, when, but I was in a building, and there was an architectural firm that was going out of business. And they had all these books. I walked in, and they told me, would you like to buy the books? I said, yes. The name of this firm was Zanziger, Bory, and Smith, one of the most prestigious architectural firms in Philadelphia that, went out of business. So I bought this collection of books. I took it back. And I consulted with Harvey Brewer at that time, because Harvey had been doing business with Winterthur, and I had a lot of books there that he thought they would be interested in. So he sold a number of books for me. But the bulk I eventually wound up selling myself. So there are 3 already, right? One more.
Okay.
There was a lady, her name was Miriam Haskell, Haskell. Miriam Haskell was a very famous jewelry designer. One day I get a call from her, and she says to me, would you be interested in a set of the, it's a set of book on posters. I'm trying to think of the title of it. All right, 6 volume set. So I said yes. So she brought it up, and it was one of 100 copies on Japan, not the ordinary copy. So I bought the set from her. Then she said, well, I have many more books in storage. I says, really? Can I see him? Yeah. So the next day, I went down to the storage. I think it was Circa on 60th and 2nd Avenue. I was down there, and I looked around, and then she also had sales receipts from Sotheby's. These were books she bought at Sotheby's. She bought them at Sotheby's. She tried putting them up, and she wound up buying them back again. You know, she was a bit deranged, I think. Anyway, I made a deal with her. I bought the books, and I came out smelling like a rose.
I can imagine.
Really great. Now, and then, naturally, all this time I was dealing in modern French illustrated book. I started going to Paris, buying there. I was buying the books at auction here and there. And I did very well. I did very well. What else can I say? I was a financial success.
But you still are.
Well, now my grandson's working with me, and he's pretty hep kid. Well, kid, he's 35. He was in Europe. See, his father and my daughter were divorced. His father had a secretary who he was screwing, and eventually he says, well, this is better than my wife, you know. So they were divorced. Matthew had been working for his father, and his sister had been working. When that happened, they both quit. They just out. And then Matthew went to Europe. You know, he must have been very upset about all of this. And he ran away. He ran away. Stayed in Europe, tried to find something to do. And then after 2 years, I was talking to him. I said, Matthew, come back here. You don't belong in Europe. Come back. You'll work in my business. He did that. It's the best thing he ever did.
I think so.
This kid, well, I call him a kid, he's fantastic. He's unbelievable. He loves this. He wouldn't do anything else in the world. If you offered him a job for $200,000 a year, he wouldn't take it. This is what he wants.
He loves it.
And he's doing very well. And he's selling a lot of stuff that I don't know. So,
well, yeah, that's a different generation.
Yeah, you know, he likes what he likes. He's interested in what he likes. He sold off. We have one customer who's a venture capitalist. And in the last 2 years, this guy has spent close to $2 million from us.
Wow.
A lot of it my inventory, and a lot of it what Matthew's been buying and selling. $2 million. So I said to Matthew, you're doing great. So his mother and he run the business. Matthew does the work with the books, etc., and my daughter does the bookkeeping and paying bills and all that sort of stuff. And I said to Matthew, you just support your mother and yourself. You know, I don't need you to support me. I don't need the money. I want you and your mother to be happy. That's what the present condition is today.
Just a couple of quick questions.
Yeah.
How would you compare the generation of booksellers today with the generation of booksellers that you grew up in the 40s and 50s? Is there any basis for comparison?
Yeah, there is somewhat. I would say that today they are more educated than they were. Well, I was not educated. I only went to high school, graduated. And I think there were booksellers then. Some were well educated, but a good many were not. Today, almost all these young kids are educated. Almost every one of them. There's a big difference.
What do you think about the internet?
My grandson loves it, so I love it because he loves it, but I don't know anything about it. Nothing, and I don't want to learn. I don't know how to work a computer, and I'll never learn, and I don't want to learn.
Okay.
You know,
do you have a cell phone?
Oh, yeah, that I have, yes.
Do you see a future for our trade, Irving? I mean, you've been in it for 60-odd years. I've been in it for 50-odd years. And I'm trying to look down the road. Is there a future for this trade in this day and age?
Well, when you say a future for the trade, who are you talking about? You're talking about the people who are in it or the people who may come into it?
I'm talking about both. Those who are already in it and those who may want to come in it.
Well, look, you go to a book fair, you know, which gives you an idea. You see the people that are in it. Most of these young people are well-educated people. Well-educated people. Now, as I said, I wasn't educated. Whatever I did by my gut feel and the love of the books and the thrill of the action. No. There was nothing to me better than buying books from a library or a dealer or a person where I was matching wits with him, but it was the thrill of the hunt.
Yeah, always.
The thrill of the hunt.
I think that's probably the most important thing. Yeah. I mean, I don't get a great kick out of selling things. I get a great kick out of finding them.
Of course, you and me both.
Yeah. So I think that maybe down the road there will be a business. It'll be different than what you and I remember.
Oh, listen, there will always be booksellers. Always. Yeah. Because there were always young people who get involved. They work for someone, and they learn, and they go into business for themselves. And they get to love it. Listen, there's no better way to live and die than working in the book business all your life. And I'll never quit until they bury me.
Well, with that great statement, thanks for the interview. It's been fabulous. I've enjoyed it. And I think everybody who sees it is going to get a big kick out of it.
Okay.
It's been wonderful. Irving, thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. And thank you.
It's been a great association. There's a lot of things that we can talk about, but we can't talk about them.
Right.
You know.